Hi guys. Tonight we drift out onto the open prairie, where the air feels so sharp it almost rings against your cheeks, and the horizon stretches so far that even the stars look lonely. You step into that stillness now, listening to the faint crunch of frost under your boots, feeling how the cold slides silently inside your coat no matter how tightly you wrap it. It already hints at how rough a cowboy's night could be, and as you settle in, you get the sense that you probably will not survive this kind of cold for more than a few hours, let alone a whole season. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, tell me your location and the time where you are watching from. Now, dim the lights. You step deeper into the wild silence of a freezing range night. The dim glow of distant starlight barely outlines the rolling land, and each breath you take fogs into a small passing cloud. The chill pulses against your skin in a slow, deliberate rhythm. You feel it in your fingers first, then your toes, then the small gap at the collar of your coat where the wind slips in with a kind of smug confidence. This is the setting where cowboys carved out their sleep, night after night, across thousands of miles of open country. You stand where the grass stiffens into icy bristles beneath your boots. The cattle herd lies scattered across the darkness, broad shapes rising like low mounds against the ground. They groan and shuffle now and then. That sound, soft and uneven, carries across the open land and blends with the distant yips of coyotes. All of it melts together into a single long whisper that wraps around you. You might be tired from a day in the saddle, but something in the air warns you that this night is not granting comfort easily. You crouch beside the weathered canvas of a bedroll, stiff with frost, and run your hand across the fabric. It feels like cold stone at first. Cowboys often called it their home because it was the only shelter they carried. A mainstream historical fact slips in here. By the late 19th century, most working cowboys relied on a combination of canvas and wool blankets, rolled tightly and slung behind the saddle, to handle cold nights. It was a simple system, but out here simple meant dependable. You unbuckle the straps. The roll unfurls with a slow sigh, releasing trapped dust, old smoke, and a hint of horse sweat. The wind catches the edge of your coat and tugs. You turn your face slightly, bracing. The horizon glimmers with that strange silver glow that often appears in winter plains at night. It is not moonlight exactly, more like the reflection of cold air rolling across the land. You feel your shoulders instinctively rise, as if you are preparing for a test. A fringe tidbit comes to life here. Some old cowhands swore that frost had a smell, claiming they could scent incoming lows by the sharp, metallic tang that hit their nose hours before the temperature dropped. You inhale deeply, wondering if you can catch it. Maybe there is something there, or maybe the cold is playing tricks on you already. You lower yourself onto the canvas and feel the ground's hardness radiating upward. It is remarkable how quickly the earth drains warmth. You shift your weight, feeling every ridge of frozen soil pressing through the fabric. Cowboys quickly learned that the ground itself was the real enemy. Not the air, not the wind, the earth. The cold seeped efficiently from below, crawling steadily up the spine no matter how many blankets lay between. Historians still argue whether cowboys during the peak cattle drive era learned this technique from indigenous tribes who had long traditions of choosing raised, dry spots for sleeping in winter. Some say yes, others say the habit emerged naturally. Either way, you can feel why something so specific mattered. A few inches of elevation could mean a few hours of survival. You stare into the darkness and listen to the wind humming against tufts of grass. The world looks endless, but right now you notice tiny details. The glittering frost on a coiled rope, the slow sway of your horse half asleep, the faint glow of cooling embers from the earlier fire. The cowboy way of resting was not about comfort. It was about training your mind to accept the unavoidable, to rest inside hardship, to let your muscles drop into a half-numb state without panicking. You settle deeper into the blankets. They feel rough against your skin. Wool scratches a little, but it also traps heat better than anything else a rider could carry. You tuck the edges around your shoulders, creating a cocoon that captures every scrap of body warmth. Your breath softens. You feel your heartbeat slow. The wind becomes a kind of lullaby, even though it is trying to freeze every part of you. Many accounts from the era describe cowboys sliding into sleep with one ear open, trained to catch the sound of a stirring herd. You imagine yourself doing the same, listening for any change in rhythm. The cattle need constant awareness, even when your eyes begin to close. As you lie there, you feel the strange intimacy of sleeping under open sky. The stars look ridiculously bright, sharp as tiny needles, and they feel closer than they do in any town. The night seems to press down, not in a suffocating way, but in a heavy, enveloping way that makes your breath sound louder than it should. You take another slow inhale and realize something unusual. Your body is beginning to acclimate. The cold hurts less. The stiffness becomes familiar. It is not comfort, but it is something like acceptance. Your horse shifts again. The soft thud of its hoof against frozen dirt pulls your attention. That steady animal presence has always been part of cowboy rest. You find yourself grateful for it, even though it is simply grazing or dozing. Out here, companionship often takes the form of whatever can stand the cold beside you. You nestle deeper into your role, feeling how the layers of canvas, hide, and wool begin to work together. The first few minutes are the hardest. After that, the system becomes surprisingly effective. You understand why cowboys trusted it. It is heavy, cumbersome, and smells faintly like old smoke, but it keeps you alive. A small shiver moves through you, but it fades quickly. The darkness feels a little softer now. You hear cattle settling. You hear nothing dangerous, just the wide, cold quiet of the western night. And you begin to drift, not fully asleep yet, but drifting, letting the range cradle you the way it did for countless riders who came before. You let the dim glow of the stars fade from your awareness as the last warmth of the campfire dwindles behind you. The glow had been a small, brave circle in the darkness earlier, but now it has settled into a nest of dying embers. You can almost hear the faint tick of cooling wood. It feels like the fire is sighing itself to sleep. Your body shifts reluctantly away from that memory of heat, and the cold slides back in as if it had just been waiting politely for its turn. You move slowly, feeling every inch of temperature change, and it makes you understand why cowboys guarded firelight as if it were a precious animal. The cold deepens as you leave that fading halo behind. It gathers around your shoulders first, then slips down your arms, then nestles into the folds of your clothes. You notice how your breath thickens in front of your face, drifting upward like slow smoke. Even though the night is still, the air has weight. It presses against your cheeks, presses against your chest, presses into your gloves. You crouch to brush a little frost from your sleeve. The crystals scatter instantly, catching what little starlight remains. Cowboys faced this scene countless times, and each time they made the same mental calculation. Do you stay near the fire, risking sparks catching in dry grass or alerting rustlers or predators with the glow? Or do you step away and let darkness swallow everything? For many cattle drives, the answer was simple. Flames were a liability. Even on frigid nights, cowboys often let them die down until only soft red coals remained. A mainstream historical fact adds itself here. Many trail bosses in the late 19th century prohibited large fires during active drives unless weather demanded it, because the light could scatter the herd or attract unwanted eyes. It was a matter of caution, not comfort. You settle into the shadows now, feeling how different the world becomes without that friendly circle of warmth. It is surprising how much noise disappears. Without crackling wood, without the subtle pop of sap, you start to hear things you had not noticed before. The quiet rustle of a distant steer rubbing against a bush, the soft groan of leather as your horse shifts its weight, the steady hum of wind weaving through dry grass. It forms a small orchestra that only the cold can conduct. You sit down, adjusting the layers of your blanket and coat. The canvas bedroll you unfurled earlier rests behind you, still holding the warmth of your body. You lean back onto it. The cold ground pushes through, but the fabric between you and the earth works hard to hold the heat you earned. Cowboys developed a strange relationship with fire, warmth, and darkness. They learned to treat each with respect, but also with an attitude that feels almost sarcastic. If the night wanted to freeze them, fine. Let it try. The body adapts faster than pride does. A fringe tidbit slips in here to keep you company. Some cowboys insisted that the best way to stay warm at night was not by hugging the fire, but by eating something greasy before bed. Bacon, beans with lard, even cold biscuits soaked in fat. They believed that the slow burn of heavy food kept the body warmer through the night. Whether it worked or not is still debated. You imagine chewing a tough strip of bacon now, the salt stinging your lip, wondering if it could possibly help against the kind of cold that seems to have patience carved into its bones. You adjust again, shifting your weight so the canvas does not bite quite so sharply. The last flicker of your earlier fire glints weakly. It is tempting to rebuild it. All you would need is a little dry grass, a spark, a few twigs, but something stops you, a note of cowboy instinct perhaps, whispering that darkness is safer. Historians still argue whether cowboys avoided bright flames mainly for herd psychology or primarily for fear of bandits and raiding parties. Some accounts favor one explanation, some the other. Maybe both are true. Out here, every choice pulled double duty. The herd murmurs again, a rippling hush that sweeps across the plains like a slow wave. You turn your head to listen. Those sounds become your safety net. They tell you that the cattle are calm, which means predators are distant, and no spooked animal is about to cause a stampede. This natural rhythm was one of the reasons cowboys could sleep at all. You can feel yourself tuning into it, matching your breath to the slow lull of the animals. It creates a kind of half-meditation, a trance born out of exhaustion and trust. The cold tries once more to get your attention. It tugs at your fingertips, then your jaw. You rub your hands together slowly. The friction builds a tiny pocket of warmth. You hold it close, savoring it. Cowboys often said that the trick was not to fight the cold aggressively, but to let your body settle into a calm, balanced state. Panic wastes energy. Anger wastes breath. Stillness keeps heat where it matters. You watch the remaining glow from the fire give its last faint wink. Now everything around you becomes shapes, outlines, and shadows. You shift to lie back fully on the roll, pulling the wool blanket up to your chin. The scratchiness feels strangely comforting. You tuck your feet in tight, creating small pockets of trapped heat at the bottom. Your shoulders relax. You feel your spine ease. The night grows enormous. You stare straight up at the sky. Stars scatter themselves across the darkness, each one impossibly bright. They do not twinkle as much as you expect. They just hold themselves steady, patient, watchful. You imagine cowboys staring at these same stars, feeling the same stillness, letting the same cold settle around them as they drifted off. You breathe in. The air is shockingly crisp, almost sweet. You breathe out. It curls into a faint cloud that vanishes immediately. Your eyelids grow heavier with each slow breath. The cattle keep murmuring. The grass keeps rustling. The night keeps pressing its cold hands gently around you. Even the absence of fire becomes soothing. It is as if the darkness itself agrees to watch over you for a few hours. And you begin to drift, easing into the long, frozen quiet that has cradled cowboys for generations. You return to the bedroll now, letting the night settle around your shoulders like an old, familiar weight. The wind has quieted, not out of kindness, but out of the strange rhythm that winter nights follow on the open plains. It rises, then rests, then rises again. Right now you catch one of those rare resting moments. The air hangs still, frosted and crisp, and you feel every breath like a slow ribbon unwinding inside your chest. This is the perfect time to understand the strange wisdom tucked inside the cowboy bedroll, that simple bundle of canvas and wool that carried entire histories of trial and error. You kneel beside it, feeling the stiff ridge of the rolled fabric push against your palm. The canvas is coated with dust, hardened by old snow, and holds the faint scent of smoke. Cowboys trusted this bundle more than any roof they rarely slept under. It was their mattress, their blanket, their shelter, their traveling companion, and sometimes the only thing standing between their bodies and a night that wanted nothing more than to steal their heat. You loosen the ties and unroll it fully, hearing the soft flop of wool hitting the frozen ground. You run your hand across the blanket. It is rough, scratchy, and oddly comforting. The coarse texture feels alive. A mainstream historical fact helps anchor this moment. By the late 19th century, the classic cowboy bedroll had become standardized across the West. It usually consisted of 2 wool blankets wrapped inside a heavy canvas sheet, all rolled tight and tied with leather straps. The wool provided warmth even when damp. The canvas blocked wind and kept out snow. This design came partly from military roll systems used in earlier frontier campaigns. Cowboys adapted it, toughened it, and swore by it for generations. You feel that practicality now. It is simple. It works. And out here, anything that works becomes sacred. You lower yourself onto the wool, bracing for the cold that waits beneath. It greets you immediately, rising from the ground in a slow, patient wave. The bedroll helps, but the earth is always persistent. You shift, trying to distribute your weight so the cold cannot concentrate in one spot. Cowboys learned this movement instinctively. Shift slightly, reposition your hip, wiggle your toes, pull your knees in. All tiny motions, all meant to maintain circulation and keep one step ahead of the cold that wants to settle deep into the bones. You lie back fully, letting the canvas fold around your shoulders. It rustles quietly. In the shadows, it almost feels like a protective shell. The sky stretches above you, deep and endless, and for a moment you imagine the countless riders who lay in this exact position before you. Men who spent weeks trailing cattle, fighting storms, humming quietly to keep the herd calm. They all slept on these same layers. They all respected the wool and the canvas the way you do now. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some cowboys believed that sleeping with their boots still on helped trap heat and keep toes from freezing. Others insisted boots should come off because the straps and stiff leather cut off circulation during the coldest hours. This disagreement became a running joke among trail crews. One camp accused the other of being reckless, while the other camp accused the first of being delicate. The truth is somewhere in the middle. You glance at your own boots and imagine debating yourself about whether to keep them on. For now, you relax your ankles, letting your feet settle gently inside the cool leather. The night deepens around you. The air seems to thicken. The cold becomes quieter but also more intimate, sliding across your cheeks like the edge of polished stone. You pull the top layer of the bedroll higher, tucking it under your chin. Your fingers brush the canvas, feeling its coarse grain. It is amazing how such an ordinary material becomes a kind of barrier against the western winter. Cowboys sometimes slept in blizzards with only the bedroll for cover, curling inside it like a cocoon until morning sun finally thawed their joints enough to move again. Your breathing narrows into a slow rhythm. The cold is still there, but it becomes a background presence. What stands out now are the textures and layers, the wool that scratches your neck, the canvas that rustles softly each time you shift, the faint warmth slowly gathering in the nest you created. Cowboys talked often about this moment. That small window when your body finally warms the space inside the roll and creates a tiny sanctuary. If you miss that window or fail to settle right, the night becomes a long fight. But if you catch it, if you relax at the right time, the cold becomes manageable, almost gentle. Historians still argue whether the precise design of the cowboy bedroll was originally influenced by earlier Navajo and Apache sleeping bundles or developed independently by trail crews who had no exposure to those indigenous systems. Some researchers point out similarities in layering methods. Others insist that cowboys built their own version from purely practical necessity. You lie there, imagining both possibilities overlapping on the same cold ground, both shaped by survival, both teaching you something about sleep in a place that does not favor weakness. Your horse shifts nearby. The soft jingle of tack brushes your ears. That sound feels grounding. Cowboys rarely slept far from their horses. A bedroll was always laid close enough to hear the animal breathe. You turn your head slightly in the darkness and listen. A slow exhale, a gentle stomp, a rustle of mane. That steady presence tells you the world is quiet, safe enough for rest. The horse would react before you could, and you trust that instinct as much as cowboys did. The cold brushes your cheek again, and you tuck your chin deeper into the wool. You adjust your legs so the blanket wraps more tightly around your knees. Warmth builds slowly. You exhale a little sigh, the kind that releases tension. Cowboys often joked that the first sigh meant your body had accepted defeat and was ready to sleep wherever it landed. Toughness only gets you so far. After that, you let the bedroll do the real work. You let your hands rest on your stomach. Your fingers curl slightly, hidden under the layers. The wool scratches lightly against your skin, and you let that texture soothe you. It is strange, but even discomfort can be comforting when the body is exhausted enough. Cowboys worked long days. 14 hours in the saddle was common, sometimes more. By nightfall, their bodies were so used up that even the hardest ground felt like a luxury. You sense that exhaustion now, the kind that wraps itself around you like a heavy blanket of its own. The night pulses with soft sounds. A distant owl hoots. The cattle shuffle and breathe. Wind skims along the grass, just enough to create a faint hiss. The stars above remain steady. You let these details drift across your mind like slow-moving clouds. Nothing is threatening. Nothing requires action. Everything can wait. You stretch one foot slightly to feel the bottom of the roll. It has already warmed from your body heat. The warmth feels like a small victory, something cowboys appreciated far more than most modern sleepers would understand. You nestle into it. The blanket holds you. The canvas shields you. The world softens. Slowly your thoughts begin to loosen. The cold, once sharp, becomes muted. The stars blur a little. Your breath falls into an easy rhythm. You feel yourself drifting in a way that feels almost slow motion. Cowboys often slipped into this half-sleep state before fully letting go, a space where their bodies rested but their ears stayed alert. You enter that space now, feeling yourself sink deeper into the wool. The bedroll creaks softly as you shift, and you let your eyes fall shut. The cold is still here, but no longer combative. It simply exists beside you. The wool grows warmer. The canvas becomes your shelter. Your muscles soften. The quiet of the range folds itself around your shoulders. And you sink, inch by inch, into the cocoon of cowboy sleep, learning the steady, patient art of surviving the cold with nothing more than canvas, wool, and the resolve to rest anyway. You step away from the quiet comfort of your warmed bedroll and let your eyes adjust to the subtle gradients of shadow stretching across the prairie. The night deepens, but your attention shifts downward now, toward the ground itself. Cold air can be endured with enough layers. Wind can be dodged with clever positioning. But the earth is the real judge of your sleep. And tonight, you learn the strange art that cowboys practiced every evening, choosing the right patch of land to spend hours lying on a world that often seemed determined to freeze them from below. You lower yourself to a crouch, letting your palm hover just above the soil. Even without touching it, you can feel the cold radiating upward like a slow breath. You brush your fingers lightly over the top layer. The dirt is crisp, brittle, and slightly powdery from frost. The Wild West looked vast and chaotic, but cowboys treated the ground like a map full of clues. They checked for dips, ridges, wet spots, animal trails, and wind channels with the same attention a sailor gives the sea. Tonight you imitate that patient scanning. A detail widely confirmed in frontier records helps shape what you see. Riders routinely avoided low-lying ground because cold air pools in dips and hollows, settling like invisible water. Even a difference of a few feet could mean the difference between waking stiff or waking numb. You straighten your back and scan the area with new eyes. That slight rise over there could keep your spine from freezing. That gentle slope could catch the wind in the wrong direction. Cowboys learned this instinctively, after countless nights spent regretting poorly chosen spots. You take a few steps toward a cluster of dried sagebrush. The plants rustle faintly, carrying a scent that feels dusty and herbal. You touch one, letting its branches scratch lightly against your glove. Cowboys often used shrubs as mini barriers, settling down on the lee side so the branches could cut wind. The trick was to find one large enough to help, but not so alive that you risked sharing your sleeping space with hidden rattlesnakes or insects. You give the bush a gentle kick, more out of habit than fear. Nothing stirs. A peculiar little anecdote circulates through cowboy lore. Some riders claim they could judge the warmth of a spot by the behavior of grasshoppers at dusk. If the insects gathered thick on a patch of ground before nightfall, cowboys believed that spot held heat better than the surrounding soil. Whether this trick ever truly worked is anyone's guess, but it became one of those funny, half-believed survival methods shared around campfires. You look around now, half expecting a stray grasshopper, though none appear in this biting cold. You kneel again, running your hand through the sparse grass. The blades are stiff and icy. They crunch softly against your fingers. The ground beneath feels uneven, as if the winter has tightened it like a drum. Cowboys would test spots just like this, sometimes lying flat for a few seconds to check whether the cold grasped too aggressively from below. You lower your palm again. The ground is harsh, but tolerable. Not far from you, your horse shifts, exhaling a slow plume of white vapor into the darkness. You glance over at its silhouette. Horses often served as wind indicators long before a cowboy felt the breeze himself. If the animal turned its hindquarters against the gusts, you knew which direction the air planned to move. You subconsciously change your angle, aligning your future sleeping spot so the wind will hit your back rather than your face. Cowboys made these subtle adjustments every night, hardly thinking about them. A topic that continues to cause disagreement among researchers comes to mind as you study the Earth again. Some experts argue that cowboys borrowed much of their ground selection strategy from observing local tribes who had perfected winter sleeping techniques over centuries. Others propose that the knowledge developed independently, as any group living outdoors long enough would reach the same conclusions. No final answer satisfies everyone, but standing here, you understand why the debate persists. The harshness of the land forces creativity. Many cultures could arrive at similar solutions. You take a few slow steps, testing soil texture with your boots. One patch feels slightly softer, another is too rocky. A third holds the faintest whisper of moisture when you press your foot down. Moisture means cold. Cold means misery. You step away from it immediately. Cowboys were extremely cautious about damp soil. Even a little dampness sank through blankets during the night, turning sleep into a shivering, half-conscious fight. You feel a small shudder imagining it. You wander closer to a fallen log lying at a gentle angle. The wood is pale, stripped by weather and sun. You run your hand across it, feeling the grain push back against your glove. Fallen logs offered shelter from wind, and sometimes provided a barrier against drifting snow. Cowboys rarely slept directly against them, because insects like to claim such places, but setting a bedroll near one could calm the wind enough to make a real difference. Your breath fogs again, thicker now. The cold nudges at your ears. You rub your hands together, creating a small pocket of warmth. You step lightly around the area, imagining where a cowboy might position himself. You picture him dragging his roll into a narrow strip beside a rock, using the stone as a shield. You imagine him choosing the space between two bushes so the wind funnels above rather than through him. You finally settle on a spot, slightly raised, dry. shielded by the faint curvature of the land. You kneel and press your palm flat against the earth. It is still cold, of course, but the chill is not aggressive here, more like a quiet presence than a biting force. This is where the cowboy version of logic played out. The perfect sleeping ground was never comfortable by modern standards. It was simply the least terrible option. You sit back on your heels and inhale slowly, letting the scents of dust, winter grass, and faint horse sweat drift into your lungs. The cold scratches your throat a little. You exhale carefully. The earth beneath you holds no warmth, but it also offers no malicious surprises. That is enough. You let yourself ease down onto your side for a moment, testing the fit of your body against the ground. Your shoulder protests. Your hip feels the hardness immediately. You shift. You adjust the angle of your knee. You adjust the tilt of your foot. The movement becomes a negotiation. Cowboys negotiated like this nightly, asking the ground for just enough tolerance to fall asleep without freezing solid. Your ear presses close to the earth for a moment, and you hear something faint, a distant thud, maybe a slow hoofbeat from another horse in the herd, or the quiet shifting of a steer settling in for the night. Sounds travel oddly through solid ground. Cowboys used those subtle vibrations as an early warning system long before the eye caught movement. You sit back up, brushing frost from your sleeve. The sky above is tranquil now, painted with dim starlight that feels softer than earlier. You take in the entire scene, the shrubs whispering quietly, the untouched frost clinging to grass, the herd breathing in slow waves, your horse standing patiently waiting for whatever comes next. Everything feels connected by the same thread of cold and survival. And now that the ground has been chosen, the rest of the night can unfold. The cowboy way begins here, in this careful, deliberate conversation with the earth. You feel your body preparing for the stillness ahead. You pull your blanket closer around your shoulders. You breathe again, deeper this time. The prairie watches silently, waiting as you settle into the next part of the long, frozen night. You ease back toward your chosen patch of ground, letting the cold wrap around your legs while your attention shifts to one of the strangest, most iconic cowboy habits, using the saddle as a pillow. It sits where you left it earlier, resting in the dim starlight like a small hill of leather and iron. You approach it with the slow confidence of someone who has already accepted that comfort is a luxury, not a guarantee. As you stand over it, the smell of oiled hide rises faintly into the air, warm and earthy, a memory of sunlight and long hours on horseback. You lower yourself to one knee beside it. The saddle creaks softly under your touch, stiff from the night chill. You run your gloved fingers along the seat, feeling the solid construction. Cowboys carried almost nothing unnecessary, and the saddle was one of the few pieces of equipment built with pure durability in mind. It was not soft. It was not forgiving, but it was their one reliable support structure, on the trail and off it. According to descriptions preserved in many old ranch journals, riders habitually used the saddle under their head because its high cantle kept the neck aligned and elevated, preventing cold air from sinking straight into the spine. You test that idea by lifting the saddle slightly. Even in the dim light, it gives the impression of sturdiness, as if carved more from stubbornness than material. You shift the saddle near your bedroll and angle it so the horn points faintly upward at an angle that feels natural. To modern eyes, this would look ridiculous, but to a cowboy, this setup made perfect sense. You sit down beside it, pressing your palm against the leather. The cold pushes back first, then slowly retreats as your body heat spreads across the surface. The smell becomes clearer now, tinged with sweat, horsehair, dust, and old trails. It is strangely grounding. A curious little story often told in frontier saloons comes to mind. Some cowboys swore that sleeping with their head on the saddle helped them stay alert because the leather transmitted vibrations from the ground more easily. If a stray steer kicked up dirt or a predator prowled nearby, the faint tremor would travel straight into the sleeper's skull, waking him before danger grew serious. Whether this was an exaggeration or a genuine technique varies depending on who you ask, but it is one of those small, rugged superstitions that fit the cowboy image perfectly. You lean down now, resting your cheek lightly against the saddle for a moment to test the feel. The surface is firm, unyielding, but supportive. The angle lifts your head high enough that your blanket can tuck around your shoulders without sliding. Cowboys counted on this positioning to trap heat better. If the shoulders exposed themselves to the night breeze, warmth leaked out fast. You feel how the saddle helps prevent that. As you shift again, adjusting your weight, a thought passes through your mind, echoing the disagreements of many researchers who study frontier life. Some propose that this pillow technique originated from Spanish vaqueros, whose saddles were taller and naturally shaped for head support during rest. Others argue that American cowboys simply adopted the habit independently after long nights of improvising comfort wherever possible. There is no single answer that satisfies every viewpoint. You sense the ambiguity, and it feels fitting. The West was built on improvisation, not standard instruction. You slide your blanket closer, pulling it over your chest as you settle your head fully against the curved leather. A small jolt of cold snakes up the back of your neck at first. You grit your teeth, then relax. Slowly, the surface warms. You feel your muscles settle into the shape of the saddle's arch, and the lines of tension tucked into your neck ease away. Your horse stands a few steps away, watching you with a sleepy curiosity. The animal's warm breath drifts in soft puffs. The faint jingle of its bridle reminds you that cowboys rarely felt alone, even in the vast emptiness of the plains. The saddle under your head carries not just your weight but the memory of countless miles traveled together. This connection anchors you. You stretch your legs, letting your boots rest near the lower edge of the roll. The cold nips at your toes, but the thick wool inside your socks traps enough heat to push back. You shift your shoulders, letting the blanket settle more snugly around your jawline. The saddle keeps your head elevated, preventing cold air from sinking into the hollows of your collar. The prairie hums quietly. A steer snorts in the distance. Another shuffles, kicking up a tiny flutter of frost. The sound travels across the plain like a slow ripple. Your eyes grow heavy, but you remain aware. Cowboys always slept in a half-ready state, bodies exhausted but minds sensitive to shifts in noise. You feel that same alertness now. The saddle's horn presses near your temple, solid and cool. Cowboys sometimes tuck their hats over the horn while sleeping, letting the brim act as a shade against moonlight or early dawn. You try that motion now. Your hat hangs loosely over the horn, tilting just enough to block the brightest stars from shining directly into your eyes. A soft darkness settles. Your breath slows, warm against the cold air as it escapes your nose. The blanket muffles the faint crackle of frost catching in the wind. You close your eyes gently, feeling the odd comfort of such a firm pillow. Cowboys preferred this solidity. Softness often meant dampness, and dampness meant misery. A saddle never got damp unless the world drowned in rain. On dry nights like this one, it was dependable. You tighten your arms around your chest, feeling your body sinking deeper into the small warmth pocket now forming around you. The saddle supports your head at just the right angle, letting your neck unclench. Your spine begins to settle. Your knees relax. Your jaw loosens. Every few seconds, your horse exhales. Each breath reassures you. Nothing is stirring in the dark except a few lazy cattle. Silence spreads gently across the land. You breathe again, long and slow. The saddle seems to cradle the base of your skull just enough to keep you steady. You feel the strange intimacy of trusting an object so rough and utilitarian to carry you into sleep. Cowboys often joked that their saddle knew them better than their own families. After long nights like this, you understand why. Your body continues to relax. Your hands grow warmer under the blanket. Your breath falls into a steady rhythm. The sky above seems to dim even without clouds. You let your head sink a little deeper into the leather curve, feeling the last tension slide away. The night grows still, the cold steadies, and the saddle becomes not just a tool but a quiet companion, easing you into the long hours ahead. You shift your weight slightly, letting the saddle settle more warmly beneath your head, and your attention drifts to the blankets wrapped around your torso. The wool presses against your skin with a stubborn firmness, scratchy but steady, like an old friend who refuses to soften but never lets you down. Tonight the cold feels deeper, creeping along the ground in a slow crawl, and you begin to appreciate just how much a cowboy depended on every fiber woven into his bedding. You draw the top blanket closer to your chin. The wool carries the scent of smoke, sweat, and a faint hint of animal musk that came from weeks on the trail. It is not unpleasant. In fact, it feels oddly reassuring, as if every layer has gathered a little warmth from all the men who slept before you. Cowboys rarely washed their blankets, not because they enjoyed grime, but because the natural oils in wool repelled moisture far better when undisturbed. You run your fingers along the edge, feeling its rugged surface. The warmth it gives is slow, steady, and honest. A fact widely taught in frontier history helps shape what you feel now. Wool blankets were prized above almost any other piece of gear. They could insulate even when damp, a trait that saved countless riders from freezing after river crossings or sudden storms. Thick buffalo robes, when available, added an even richer layer of insulation. Early accounts describe cowboys trading almost anything except their horse to get a quality robe during winter drives. You understand the desperation behind that now, with the cold nipping through even your heaviest layer when the wind shifts. You adjust your position so the blanket forms a sealed cocoon around your shoulders. It rustles slightly, and the sound merges with the faint hum of the prairie. Your horse paws the ground nearby, then settles again. A moment later, a new scent slips into the air, something earthy, slightly musky. You reach for the second blanket at your feet and lift it closer to inspect its dense weave. Tucked inside is a lining made from buffalo hair, thick and coarse. Cowboys added these linings to blunt the worst winter nights. Buffalo hair traps heat the way few natural fibers can, creating pockets of warm air between each stiff strand. A small, curious story rises from memory. Some old trail riders insisted that sleeping wrapped in buffalo hide invited more vivid dreams, claiming the material carried the spiritual weight of the plains. They said the dreams could warn a man about trouble ahead, or remind him to check his herd before dawn. Whether you believe in such things or not, you cannot deny that the blanket carries a presence. It feels heavier than wool, older somehow, as if holding the echoes of a world that existed long before fences cut the land into neat shapes. You nestle deeper, pressing your cheek against the warm interior. The heat builds slowly, spreading across your chest and down your arms. The cold still presses at the edges, but your blankets form a barrier strong enough to make the night feel survivable. Your mind wanders to a long-standing scholarly disagreement about winter gear on the open range. Some researchers argue that cowboy bedding practices were heavily influenced by fur trading communities in the Northern Territories, who perfected the layering of hides and wool for sub-zero conditions. Others suggest that cowboys simply learned through hard experience and adapted whatever they could get their hands on. There is no firm consensus, and perhaps that mystery adds to the myth of cowboy resilience. You breathe in again, letting the warmth settle around your ribs as you imagine both cultures crossing paths on lonely plains. You tuck your knees slightly toward your chest, creating a small cradle of warmth that spreads quickly through your legs. The blanket brushes against the rough fabric of your trousers, and the friction generates a soft heat. Your boots stay close to the edge of the roll, collecting just enough trapped air to keep your toes from numbing. You flex your feet inside the leather, feeling blood circulate again. The range around you has fallen into a deep hush. Only the cattle break the silence, their movements soft and scattered, like slow waves passing through the dark. The sound helps you relax further. Cowboys often describe that steady rhythm as the best nighttime reassurance they ever knew. If the herd stayed calm, so could you. Your fingers wander across the seams of the buffalo-lined blanket. They feel thick, uneven, and hand-stitched. Cowboys frequently repaired their own bedding, patching tears with bits of leather or twine. These blankets aged like living things. Every mark told a story. A snag from a thorny bush, a scorch mark from a night spent too close to a fire, a tear sown clumsily by someone too cold to care about neatness. You feel the personality of the blanket as much as its weight. The cold presses gently at the top of your head, so you pull your hat down a little further. The brim tilts just enough to block the icy air without covering your breath. You tuck your chin deeper under the wool, and the warmth becomes richer, more intimate. Your body has finally built a pocket of heat inside the roll. You can feel it cling to your skin like a second layer, protective and steady. You shift one arm out from under the blanket. Immediately the cold clamps down, biting along the exposed skin. You pull the arm back in quickly. Cowboys learn to avoid that exact mistake. Expose one limb for too long and it could stiffen, making morning chores twice as painful. They kept everything tucked, sealed, and layered. You mimic that instinct now, feeling the importance of each inch of fabric around you. You turn slightly onto your side, pressing the buffalo lining closer. The coarse fibers create tiny pockets of air that trap warmth remarkably well. You inhale through your nose, noticing the faint scent of old leather, dried grass, and wool that has traveled hundreds of miles. These smells might seem harsh in daylight, but at night they become grounding. They tell you that you are wrapped in the same protection that generations of riders trusted. A breeze glides across the prairie, gentle but cold. It brushes the outside of your blanket, but the layers hold firm. You feel the wind's edge, a coolness that never reaches your skin. You relax into it, appreciating how well your primitive insulation shields you. Cowboys used what they had, but what they had was often brilliant in its simplicity. Your horse gives a soft grunt, then settles again. You shift your hips slightly, adjusting to the contour of the ground. Your body sinks another inch into the warmth. Your breath slows. The wool tickles your cheek. The buffalo hair cradles your chest. The darkness folds around you like a slow-moving tide. You feel the warmth growing stronger now. A slow, steady build. It crawls from your shoulders down to your knees, filling every corner of the space you created. This is why cowboys trusted wool and buffalo hide. Not because they were comfortable in the traditional sense, but because they offered survival disguised as rough bedding. Your eyelids grow heavier as the warmth settles deeper. The blankets hold you in place, forming a small sanctuary against a vast, unforgiving world. You curl slightly tighter, letting the insulation wrap around your ribs, your arms, your legs, until you feel almost weightless. The prairie remains quiet, as if holding its breath while you drift. You inhale once more, slow and warm. The wool scratches lightly against your jaw. The buffalo hair feels heavy but comforting. The cold lingers at the edges, but it cannot reach you now. Wrapped in these humble layers, you begin to understand how cowboys managed to sleep through brutal cold. Not with comfort, not with ease, but with a stubborn acceptance carried inside wool, hide, and sheer endurance. You let that thought settle as your body sinks deeper into the warmth, drifting slowly into the steady quiet of the winter night. You lie still for a moment, letting the warmth inside your bedroll build, and then your ears begin to tune themselves to something deeper than the cold or the wind. It is the sound of the herd, a low, rhythmic blend of snorts, shifting hooves, and slow breaths drifting across the darkness like water moving under ice. You lift your head slightly from the saddle, adjusting your ear toward the soft chorus. This is the nightly music that shaped cowboy sleep more than blankets or campfires ever could. The range might be huge, the sky endless, but the herd made you feel less alone. Their sounds became a lullaby and an alarm system at the same time. You shift onto your side, listening more intently. One steer exhales sharply, another scuffs a hoof in the dirt. The noises overlap in a quiet, almost hypnotic rhythm. Cowboys relied on this harmony. If the herd stayed calm, they rested easily. If the rhythm broke, they woke in an instant. You find your breathing matching the pattern, slow and steady, as if your body understands the old rule without being taught. A detail that appears often in the journals of trail hands comes to mind. Herd animals at night tended to cluster loosely, spreading their weight across the ground while keeping enough distance to avoid crowding. Their steady noises carried across the plains and helped cowboys judge the cattle's mood. A restless herd meant danger. A quiet herd meant safety. You notice how each few seconds brings another soft grunt or shifting sound. Nothing urgent, nothing frantic. Everything seems balanced. The soundscape wraps gently around you. The breeze glides through dry grass with a soft hiss. Your horse lowers its head, tearing a few brittle stems from the earth. Farther away, a single cow gives a low, drawn-out moan that rolls across the darkness. It feels almost melodic. Cowboys described this nighttime choir as a kind of living heartbeat that pulsed through the prairie. Listening now, you understand exactly why. Your fingers rest loosely on the edge of your blanket. The wool traps heat, and the buffalo lining holds it even better. Yet it is not just warmth that soothes you. It is the steady reassurance of that distant, wandering music. You let your eyes drift half shut, imagining how many riders fell asleep to the exact same melody over the decades. Their bodies exhausted, their nerves stretched thin, but their minds anchored by the cattle's slow breathing. A peculiar little piece of cowboy lore flickers in your thoughts. Some riders claimed they could identify specific cows in the dark just by their nighttime noises. They said certain steers had distinct snores or particular rhythms in the way they shuffled their hooves. Other cowboys laughed at this claim, insisting it was simply the imagination of men who spent too much time outdoors. Still, the idea adds a bit of humor to the heavy air, and you find yourself listening with curiosity to see if any particular voice stands out. You shift your head back onto the saddle gently, letting your neck sink into the familiar curve. The leather feels warm now, holding the shape of your skull. The sound of the herd seems louder from this angle. Not overwhelming, just closer. You can almost map the herd's positions based on the distance of each grunt. You picture the animals forming small clusters, some lying down, some standing, some half grazing in their sleep. A long-standing disagreement among researchers lingers around this very phenomenon. Some argue that the calm, nighttime noises of cattle helped prevent stampedes because the herd sensed its collective rhythm and relaxed as a unit. Others believe the sounds had no real effect, claiming that panic spread so quickly during danger that no amount of nighttime harmony could stop it. There is no final verdict, and you find yourself imagining both possibilities as you listen to the herd breathe calmly under the stars. You tuck your chin deeper under the blanket as a breeze brushes the outside of your bedding. The cold tries to squeeze in, but your layers hold firm. The warmth deepens around you, steady and comforting. You inhale through your nose, taking in the dry scent of winter grass, leather, dust and wool. These aromas blend with the steady sound of the herd, creating a kind of sensory cradle that rocks you gently. A steer lets out a sudden snort that wakes your attention briefly. You lift your head an inch, listening carefully. The rustling pattern remains calm. No alarm. You lower your head again. Cowboys train themselves to react just like that. A sudden noise meant, listen first, move only if necessary. You feel the instinct settle into your bones, as if you have always known this quiet dance with the cattle. You stretch your legs slowly inside the bedroll. The warmth moves with you, and the blankets rustle softly. The sound blends with the herd's movements. Everything feels connected, each noise slipping seamlessly into the next. The cattle shift again, a wave of muffled steps moving across the space. You relax into the rhythm. The sky glows faintly with starlight. A thin cloud passes overhead, dimming the stars for a moment, then revealing them again. The cattle respond to small changes like this. Their breathing pauses, then resumes. You listen closely, learning their patterns. Cowboys often said that in the night, you learned the herd the way sailors learned the sea. Every ripple, every shift, every breath meant something. Another small anecdote comes to mind. Some trail hands liked to hum quietly while drifting to sleep, claiming the cattle relaxed when they heard a human voice. They hummed simple tunes or repeated soft phrases, Whether the cattle actually reacted to these noises or simply ignored them is unclear, but many riders swore by the practice. You consider humming now, but the night feels so peaceful that adding any sound of your own might break the spell. Your hands grow warmer under the blanket. Your breath evens out. The saddle supports your neck. The herd sings quietly into the cold. Everything around you settles into a gentle stillness. And yet the stillness is not empty. It is full of life, full of tiny sounds that keep your senses grounded. You close your eyes more fully now. The cattle continue their slow, steady chorus. A hoof thumps softly. A cow exhales a long breath. A rustle of grass wanders through the dark. Your mind floats on these sounds, carried by them the way a leaf drifts on water. You inhale once more, deeply. Warm air gathers inside your blanket, rising and falling with your chest. Your heartbeat slows. The herd's rhythm becomes your rhythm. The night becomes softer, safer, quieter. And with the steady music of cattle circling you, you begin to drift again, wrapped in warmth, wrapped in sound, sinking gently into the long winter night. You shift slightly under your blankets, feeling the heat you built earlier settle more firmly around your chest. But the night still has teeth. The cold creeps toward your fingers and toes with slow determination, as if testing the weak points of your cocoon. You tighten your grip on the wool, curl your shoulders inward, and focus on the small details of your own body. Out here, survival depends as much on warmth management as on cattle or gear. Cowboys understood this instinctively, especially when frost threatened to stiffen fingers and turn toes numb long before dawn. You wiggle your toes inside your boots, feeling the thick wool socks rub against your skin. The motion sends a faint spark of warmth up your calves. Cowboys did this often without thinking. Tiny movements kept their blood circulating. Stillness might conserve energy, but too much stillness invited frostbite. You flex your toes again, imagining how trail hands would shift their feet every few minutes, especially on nights when the cold pressed hard enough to sting. A detail commonly mentioned in old ranch diaries returns to you now. Cowboys learned early that layering mattered more than sheer thickness. 2 thinner socks trapped heat better than 1 bulky pair, and stuffing a bit of dry grass inside the boot created a simple but surprisingly effective insulating layer. You think about that trick as you stretch your toes again. The old methods might look primitive, but they carried a kind of practical genius. You free one hand from your blanket for a moment. The cold snaps at your knuckles instantly. You pull your hand back in with the urgency of someone who has just touched ice water. Inside the blanket, your fingers regain warmth slowly, tingling as blood flows through them. Cowboys understood this reaction well. They avoided exposing their hands unless absolutely necessary, especially on nights like this when even metal tools felt like frozen stones. A small, curious anecdote drifts into your mind. Some cowhands swore by rubbing a bit of animal fat on their fingertips before bed, believing it helped trap warmth and prevented skin from cracking. Others found the idea messy and unnecessary, but it became one of those quirky habits that passed from one crew to another, changing slightly each time, like a piece of folklore disguised as practical advice. You imagine scooping a little fat between your fingers now, though you settle instead for rubbing your palms together inside the blanket until heat blooms again. You nestle deeper into your roll, adjusting the blanket so it seals more tightly around your shoulders. The warmth grows thicker, but you still feel the cold tracing the edges of your cocoon, searching for openings. You tuck your elbows close to your ribs. This posture became a common cowboy habit on freezing nights. Closed body positions preserved warmth, while extended limbs lost it quickly. You shift your shoulders inward even more, feeling the heat gather in the core of your body like a small glowing coal. Your breath curls in soft clouds against the inside of your blanket. You angle your face toward the wool, letting the fabric catch some of the warm air. Cowboys often turned their faces slightly downward to warm the space directly around their mouth and nose. It kept their breathing comfortable and softened the bite of the cold air that hovered just outside the roll. You take another slow breath, savoring the subtle heat forming in front of your lips. Your horse snorts gently nearby, the sound muffled but reassuring. You listen closely. Its breathing tells you the cold has deepened. Horses breathe heavier when frost settles thick on their hides. You glance in its direction. A faint outline appears in starlight, the animal standing with its head lowered, conserving warmth the same way you are. Cowboys often read their horses like this, using the animal's reactions to judge how the night was progressing. A long-running disagreement in frontier studies surfaces in your thoughts. Some researchers believe cowboys developed exceptional resistance to cold simply through constant exposure, while others argue it was the result of strategic tricks passed down between generations. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. You feel both sides of the argument in your own body now. The cold still challenges you, but your instincts know how to respond better than they did just hours ago. You pull one knee upward inside the bedroll, creating a small pocket of warm air near your thigh. Then you shift the other knee to mirror the movement. This small shelter of warmth expands across your legs almost immediately. Cowboys often curled slightly in this way, protecting the vulnerable areas of their bodies from direct exposure to the ground's cold pull. You sense the wisdom of the posture as heat slides along your muscles. Your hands explore the inside of the blanket again. The wool holds warmth well, but the buffalo lining holds it even better. Your fingertips brush the coarse inner fibers, and the sensation reminds you of how deeply resourcefulness shaped cowboy life. Nothing was wasted. Every material had purpose. Every layer played a part. Another fragment of cowboy lore surfaces. Some riders slept with a heated stone wrapped in cloth tucked near their feet if they had access to a campfire earlier. The stone released warmth gradually through the night. It was unreliable, and few cowboys bothered with the extra effort unless the cold reached truly desperate levels. Tonight you wish for such a stone, though the heat inside your bedroll feels strong enough now to sustain you. The wind shifts lightly above you. You hear grass brush against grass, a soft whispering sound. You pull your hat a little lower, letting its brim add one more layer of protection for your forehead. Cowboys sometimes slept with the hat brim covering their noses slightly, letting their own breath warm the air around their face. You try a gentler version of this trick now. The air becomes noticeably milder, enough to soothe your cheeks. Your toes begin to tingle again, a good sign. You wiggle them softly, keeping the blood moving. This rhythmic motion becomes almost hypnotic. You flex your fingers next, just a little, then tuck your hands tighter under your chest. The warmth gathers again. The herd murmurs in the distance, a slow sweep of sound across the night. You listen closely, letting their rhythm comfort you. Each noise reminds you that you are not alone out here. Even in this cold so sharp it feels ancient. The cattle breathe, shuffle, and drift. Their warmth radiates into the air, subtle but present. You curl deeper into your blankets. The warmth becomes fuller now, soaking into your spine and shoulders. Your body has stopped fighting the cold and instead learned to work with the insulation around you. This shift feels peaceful, almost meditative. Cowboys describe this moment often, the point where the cold stops being an enemy and becomes simply part of the night. Your breath slows, your limbs loosen, the warmth holds strong. You feel your fingertips soften inside the blanket. Your toes glow faintly with returning heat. The night still presses firmly against your shelter, but it cannot break through. You have sealed yourself in well, just as countless cowboys did, trusting small tricks, careful layers, and the instinct to protect the body's most fragile parts. You exhale one more slow, warm breath into the folds of your blanket. The wool catches it. The cold stays out. The prairie hums softly. And your body relaxes fully, knowing it has beaten back the worst of the night for now. You feel the warmth inside your bedroll settle into a steady pulse, but the quiet reminder settled in the back of your mind refuses to fade. Not every night on the trail allowed the luxury of a fire. In fact, many of the coldest nights were the ones when cowboys willingly kept flames dark. You lift your head a little from the saddle and let your eyes adjust to the soft, star-soaked darkness that surrounds you. No flicker of orange, no glowing coals. Just the faint shimmer of frost on the grass and the endless bowl of the night sky stretched above. Tonight, you sense the same caution that pushed cowboys to extinguish fire even when the temperature sank low enough to sting through wool. Fire can cast comfort, but it also casts danger. A bright flame could spook cattle or reveal a camp to anyone who had no business finding it. So you imagine your own camp, practicing that tense ritual now, letting the embers die until nothing remains but the faint smell of smoke drifting upward. You shift your shoulders slightly, rearranging your blanket as you take in the raw silence. Without fire, the cold feels deeper, sharper, but it also lets you hear the landscape more clearly. The sound of the wind brushing across dry grass becomes louder. The quiet breaths of nearby cattle grow more distinct, and somewhere far off, coyotes let out a thin, rising cry that fades quickly into the dark. You listen with the awareness that cowboys nurtured by necessity. A detail often mentioned in the writings of early trail captains circles through your thoughts. Large fires were prohibited on most drives because even a brief flare of light could set a nervous herd into motion. The shadows created by bright flames confused the animals, turning small movements into monstrous shapes. That confusion could trigger panic, and panic meant stampede. You picture a rider glancing repeatedly toward the spot where a fire should be, hands itching for warmth but knowing better than to strike a spark. You take a slow breath, pulling the cold air deep into your lungs. The sky feels enormous without the intrusion of smoke or firelight. Stars sharpen. The air turns glassy and still. Your senses stretch outward, reaching past your own small warmth. Everything feels both fragile and vast at once. Your fingers adjust the edge of your blanket again. Inside the roll, heat collects well. Outside it, the cold hangs like a curtain. You press your cheek to the wool and feel how quickly the temperature changes when just a bit of skin is exposed. Cowboys knew that even brief exposure could cost them precious heat. That knowledge shaped every movement. A stray memory from the folklore of the range comes to mind. Some cowhands believed that sleeping without a fire made a man tougher, that the land respected those who embraced the darkness. They said the night wrapped around such riders more gently, as if rewarded by the earth itself. Whether this idea ever held any real truth is impossible to know, but the claim says something about how these men framed hardship. If the cold could not be avoided, it could at least be dignified. You turn your body slightly, letting one knee shift inside the bedroll. The cold pushes at your exposed boot heel. You tuck it back in quickly. Every inch of warmth matters. You curl your legs tighter, sealing yourself more firmly inside the layers. The absence of fire makes the cold less forgiving. You sense the ground beneath you as a slow, patient force that pulls at the warmth inside your bones. The sky above takes on a black-blue sheen. A faint halo of frost begins to form on your hat brim. You tap it lightly and brush off the glittering crystals. Cowboys often woke to find themselves covered with a delicate coating of ice on nights like this. Their blankets grew stiff. Their saddles glinted white. Even their eyelashes froze together if they slept too long. A debate among frontier historians returns to your mind as you stretch your arms slightly under the covers. Some argue that cowboys avoided fire mainly to protect the herd from confusion. Others insist the caution had more to do with avoiding unwanted visitors, both human and animal. Bandits, rival trail outfits, and even curious wolves all found their way to firelight. The truth likely lies in the combination of both explanations. The West rarely offered a single reason for anything. You draw your hands deeper beneath your chest and breathe into your blanket to create a pocket of warm air. The wool absorbs the heat quickly. You exhale again. The air softens around your cheeks. This small trick mattered when flames were not an option. Cowboys relied on their own breath and body heat to create comfort, not on glowing embers. Your horse shifts its weight nearby, hooves pressing softly into the earth. The subtle movement reminds you that the animals endured these dark nights as well, often huddled together for warmth when the cold grew severe. You picture cattle curling their bodies against one another, their thick hides blocking wind far better than wool. They slept standing, half dreaming, half listening to predators. That resilience gave cowboys courage. You rest your head back onto the saddle and close your eyes for a moment, listening to the cold, not feeling it, listening. The absence of fire sharpens everything. You can sense the faint tremor of hooves through the ground, the hush of shifting animals, the small crack of frost breaking under pressure. These sounds wrap around you, creating a different kind of comfort. Not warm, but familiar. You open your eyes again and stare upward. The stars seem brighter now that your eyes have adjusted. They cluster thick above you, forming pale rivers across the sky. Cowboys often pass time naming constellations or creating their own stories to stay awake during night guard. In the quiet of a fireless camp, the sky felt closer. You imagine picking out your own constellations now, tracing your finger through the air and connecting stars as if they are part of some forgotten map. A cold breeze slips across your cheek. You retreat deeper into your bedroll. The buffalo hair brushes your chin, warm and dense. This fabric becomes your anchor again. Without fire, you depend entirely on the materials around your body: wool, hide, canvas, and breath. These were the real tools of survival. You stretch your toes again, feeling them regain warmth. The sensation spreads slowly upward. You shift your hips, settle more deeply into the earth, and let your body mold to the contours of the ground. The cold still presses, but you have learned enough tricks to manage it. Another story from cowboy lore rises gently in your memory. Riders sometimes whispered that the nights without fire made the stars whisper to the ground. No one agreed on what that meant, but the idea always held a quiet charm. Perhaps they meant that, in the dark, every sense sharpened. Perhaps they meant that silence held messages if a man was patient enough to listen. You close your eyes again and hear the soft murmur of cattle far across the camp. Their breaths meet the wind and blend with it. Your horse exhales in a gentle sigh. You settle your chin into the blanket, taking one last slow breath of warm air. Without fire, the night becomes honest. It shows you its cold edges, its shadows, its quiet truths. The prairie does not hide behind flickering light. It stretches open, wide and stark, and waits for you to accept it. You do. And wrapped inside your blankets, warmed little by little through your own efforts, you drift into sleep guided not by firelight but by the pure, unbroken darkness of the wild. You shift slightly in your bedroll, letting the darkness settle more heavily around your shoulders. The cold has reached its deepest point of the night, a kind of quiet intensity that presses against the ground and folds into every hollow of the land. But sleep on the range has rules of its own, and one of the harshest is the rotation of night guard. Cowboys did not sleep all the way through until morning. They slept in pieces, and each man took his turn watching over the herd. Now you imagine the moment when your name is called softly through the dark, and you must leave the warm cocoon you worked so hard to build. You lift your head reluctantly from the saddle. The leather, warm from your body, clings to your cheek for a second before releasing you back into the night. A rush of cold air hits your face immediately, stinging your skin. You grit your teeth and pull your blankets aside, feeling the chill creep in like a slow wave. Every cowboy knew this sensation. The hardest part of guard duty was not the watch itself, but the moment of leaving warmth behind. You sit up and rub your hands together, trying to coax life back into your fingers. In the dim starshine, the ground looks like a sheet of silver, each blade of grass coated with frost. You take a slow breath before rising to your feet. The air is sharp, almost metallic, and the cold settles into your ribs as you inhale. You draw your coat tighter around you. This is the hour when the world feels most silent, most ancient, as if the land has paused in its own long breath. A fact commonly referenced in accounts of trail life returns to your mind. Night guard was divided into shifts called watches. Each watch lasted a couple of hours, and riders rotated so no one man carried the burden alone. The most dreaded watch was the one just before dawn, when the cold peaked and exhaustion tugged at the mind like a heavy tide. You feel a flicker of sympathy for every cowboy who had to rise at this hour, especially on nights when sleep had barely begun to settle into his bones. You step carefully toward your horse, whose silhouette waits patiently a few paces away. The animal lifts its head and turns slightly as you approach. Its warm breath swirls in soft clouds. You place a hand gently on its neck, letting your fingers sink into its thick winter coat. The warmth that radiates from the animal feels almost alive, almost comforting enough to pull you back from the chill. The horse shifts, then settles, as if understanding your purpose. A small story traded among trail hands surfaces in your mind. Some riders insisted that a horse could sense when a man on guard duty was drifting towards sleep, nudging him gently or stamping a hoof to snap him awake. Whether this was true or simply the wishful thinking of exhausted cowhands, the image brings a faint smile to your face. You would appreciate such a guardian tonight. You begin your slow walk around the perimeter of the herd. The cattle rest scattered across the frost-coated ground, their bodies rising like dark mounds in the pale starlight. You listen closely. A snort, a shuffle, the slow grind of a hoof against frozen soil. These sounds tell you the herd is calm. The rhythm is steady. Nothing is stirring with fear. You pull your coat tighter as a gust of wind passes through. It is not strong, but it carries a bite that slips through seams and creeps along your spine. You tuck your chin into your collar. Cowboys fought cold not with thick clothing but with constant movement. A slow patrol around the herd created enough warmth to keep blood flowing. Still, the cold always managed to slip in somewhere, a reminder that the night was not a companion but a challenge. A small, curious tale flickers across your memory. Some cowboys chewed on small slivers of rawhide during guard duty to keep themselves awake. Others sang very softly or muttered stories under their breath to keep their minds from drifting. The point was simple. Stillness invited sleep, and sleep on guard invited disaster. You pause for a moment near the edge of the herd and let your eyes scan the horizon. The land stretches out like a dark ocean, rippling slightly in the faint breeze. A few scattered clouds drift across the sky, their shapes barely visible against the stars. You listen again. Nothing unusual. The cattle continue their quiet breathing. A disagreement that appears often in discussions of cowboy life crosses your thoughts. Some researchers claim night guard was the most feared task of the trail, more frightening than storms or river crossings. Others argue it was simply the most exhausting. The truth likely lies in the overlap of both feelings. Fear kept men alert. Exhaustion tried to pull them under. You feel both of those emotions brushing gently against your thoughts now. You take another slow step. The frost crunches beneath your boot. The sound is sharp, like a crack in thin ice. Somewhere in the distance an owl calls, then falls silent again. You shift your weight and rub your gloved hands together for more warmth. Your breath spills into the air in thick puffs that drift sideways in the wind. As you continue your patrol, you think about how night guard created a strange kind of intimacy between a cowboy and the land. In daylight, the prairie seemed huge, impossible to fully grasp. But at night, with only the sound of cattle and the soft rhythm of your own footsteps, the world felt closer. You could sense small shifts in wind, small changes in animal movement, and even the faint pull of the earth cooling beneath you. Your horse walks beside you now, matching your pace. Its presence keeps you grounded. You hear the soft thud of hooves with each step. You rest your hand occasionally on its neck, letting its warmth seep into your fingers. Cowboys rarely patrolled alone. Their horses accompanied them like silent partners, watching the darkness with calmer eyes. You pause again at the far edge of the herd, scanning the shapes spread across the land. The cattle remain peaceful. Their breaths rise in slow waves, creating a faint mist that hangs low before dissolving into the night. You feel your shoulders relax a little. Guard duty rarely granted comfort, but it granted purpose, and purpose kept men awake. The cold thickens around you again. You swallow slowly, feeling the chill at the back of your throat. You shift your weight and take another step, then another. The repetition becomes its own rhythm. Step, listen, breathe. Step, Listen, breathe. Your mind drifts to the cowboys who walked this same path decades before you. Men who guarded herds across Kansas, Texas, Colorado, and beyond. Men who measured time not by clocks but by stars and the rising chill. You feel a sense of kinship with them, even though the years between you are countless. The night has a way of erasing distance. Your breath grows steadier. Your steps grow sure. The quiet becomes familiar. And little by little, the shiver in your body settles into something calmer. Guard duty is cold. It is lonely. But it is also necessary. It gives shape to the night. You take one last circuit, passing the cattle slowly, listening for any change. Nothing shifts. Nothing stirs. The herd remains calm. And that calm enters your body like a slow wave of reassurance. Soon your shift will end, and someone else will rise from his bedroll to take your place. You will return to your blankets, curl again into your small pocket of warmth, and drift off as the world continues its slow, frozen rhythm. But for now, you keep watch, steady and quiet, a single figure walking through a vast, silent sea of cold and starlight. You feel the weight of fatigue settling into your shoulders as you complete your final slow circuit around the herd. The cold has sharpened again, the kind that sneaks beneath your coat and curls against your ribs. You give your horse a gentle tap on the neck, signaling the end of your patrol, and guide it back toward your bedroll. But as you approach your small patch of ground, the wind gives a sudden surge, louder and harsher than before. It sweeps across the prairie with a long, rising moan that makes the grass bow low and sends a spray of icy dust skittering over the earth. The night has shifted. You kneel beside your blankets and rest your hand on the saddle, waiting for the gust to pass. It does not. Another surge follows, then another. This is how rainstorms often begin, not with lightning or clouds, but with restless wind that grows teeth. You glance at the horizon. The sky looks unchanged, but you can feel the tension hiding in the air. Cowboys knew this feeling well. A calm night could turn treacherous in minutes, especially when winter storms rolled across open country without warning. You settle back into your bedroll as quickly as you can. The warmth you created earlier still lingers inside the layers, but now the cold presses harder at the edges. You pull the buffalo-lined blanket up to your chin and tuck your elbows tightly against your sides. The canvas rustles against your shoulders as the wind pushes against it. You breathe into the wool again, letting the warm air collect near your face. A detail often mentioned in frontier newsletters and ranch letters surfaces in your thoughts. Cowboys described sudden cold fronts sweeping across the plains like invisible walls. One moment the night felt manageable. The next it felt like a blast of ice straight from the mountains. These shifts caught many riders off guard. Even the most seasoned cowboys could be humbled by storms that moved faster than a horse could gallop. You lie back as the wind intensifies. The ground trembles slightly beneath you, not from hooves, but from the movement of air pushing across the land. Your horse shuffles nervously beside your bedroll, snorting once before lowering its head. Animals sense storms before humans do. You reach out a hand and touch its leg lightly, grounding both of you. Another gust tears across the prairie, bringing with it the faintest sting of dust against your cheeks. You tighten your blanket and angle your body so the wind hits your back rather than your chest. Cowboys learned these tricks instinctively. Position mattered. A slight shift in angle could save precious warmth. A curious old story from trail tradition comes to mind. Some cowhands swore the wind carried voices during storms, claiming they could hear faint calls or whispers weaving through the gusts. Others dismissed it as the imagination of exhausted men trying to stay awake. Tonight, as you listen closely, the wind does seem to hold a strange timbre. Not voices exactly, but layers of sound that flicker in and out like distant murmurs. You close your eyes and let the storm develop around you. The cattle begin to respond. A few shift. One snorts loudly. Another stamps a hoof, agitated. Their unease moves in small waves through the herd, creating a low chorus of restless sounds. You know this pattern well. The animals can tolerate cold, but sudden blasts unsettle them. Cowboys often feared storms less for the weather itself, and more for what it could do to the herd. A frightened steer could set off a chain reaction, turning quiet night into chaos. You lift your head slightly to listen more carefully. The cattle are restless but not panicked. Their breathing grows heavier. Their movements grow sharper. You settle back again, trusting that your earlier guard shift gave you enough sense of their mood. The herd has not crossed the line into danger. You shift deeper into your bedroll. The wind presses harder now, pushing the canvas against your back with small jolts. The cold sneaks along your neck. You tuck your chin and pull your hat lower. Your breath creates a fog inside the blanket. You inhale that warm air again, holding it for a few seconds before releasing it in a slow stream. A long-standing debate in frontier studies drifts through your mind as you adjust your legs. Scholars examining old drive records argue whether cowboys adapted better to storms through experience or sheer endurance. Some insist it was technique and constant observation that made survival possible. Others claim it was simply grit, stubbornness, and the willingness to keep moving even when the cold cut deep. You feel both sides tugging at your senses now. Knowledge helps, but endurance carries you through the moments when knowledge runs out. Another gust slams across the prairie. This one's stronger. It lifts tiny grains of frozen dust and flings them across your bedroll like sand. The canvas rattles. You brace your shoulders and let the storm wash over you. The noise grows louder, like a distant river rushing through a canyon. Then it dips for a moment, only to return with renewed force. Storm winds on the plains rarely come as steady streams. They surge in pulses, attacking and retreating, as if feeling their way across the land. Your horse turns its body to face away from the wind, a sign of instinct working quietly. You adjust your own position to mirror the animal. This alignment gives your back the most protection and lets your blankets hold their warmth better. The buffalo lining presses warmly against your chest, heavy but steady. The cattle moan again. One lets out a longer, lower sound that echoes faintly. You listen closely. Still no panic, just discomfort. You feel a flicker of relief. You lie still for a moment, letting the sound of the wind settle into your awareness. It roars. It quiets. It roars again. Your bedroll rustles. Your breath fogs. Your fingers twitch inside your blanket, trying to shake off the cold creeping into your knuckles. A small anecdote from cowboy lore drifts through your thoughts. Some riders said the best way to outlast storm winds was to imagine themselves sinking into the earth like stones. The less you fought the cold, the easier it became to endure. You try that now. You let your muscles loosen. You let your body settle heavily into the ground. The cold still surrounds you, but your resistance softens. You exhale slowly, letting your breath fill your small shelter again. The wind screams briefly above you, but your blankets hold. The warmth grows steadier. A quiet confidence settles in your chest. Storm nights tested every man on the range. They tested blankets, bedrolls, horses, and nerves. But they also taught resilience. Tonight you feel that lesson taking shape inside you. Each gust that crashes across the land reminds you that cold is a companion as much as it is a threat. It shapes you. It challenges you. It forces you to adapt. The storm pulses again, but you remain steady in your little nest of wool and canvas. The herd begins to calm. Your horse breathes evenly. The wind loses a bit of its bite. Wrapped in warmth while the storm rages above, you sink slowly into a wary, half-conscious rest. Not quite asleep, not fully awake, balanced somewhere between the two, just as cowboys did for generations on winter nights when the sky refused to stay still. You lie still as the storm wind slowly fades, leaving the prairie wrapped in a deep, uneasy quiet. The blankets hold your warmth, but your ears stay alert. Out here, sleep was never a complete surrender. Cowboys drifted in and out of awareness, always listening for the night's shifting balance. Now you feel that same fragile awareness settling into your thoughts. The wind has calmed, But the predators that roam the plains do not move with the storm. They move with hunger. And the dark around you seems to thicken with the possibility of watching eyes. You lift your head slightly, letting your ear hover above the saddle's curved leather. The cold air brushes beneath your jawline as you scan the silence. The soundscape has changed. The cattle, which murmured restlessly during the storm, now grow quieter, their movements slower. You hear occasional breaths, soft exhalations drifting upward. Their calmness is reassuring, but you also know that true danger approaches quietly, not loudly. A detail often repeated in the old accounts of range life surfaces in your thoughts. Cowboys relied heavily on their ears at night because visibility was almost non-existent. Moonlight helped when the sky allowed it, but many nights were as dark as closed barns. Coyotes, cougars, and wolves knew how to use that darkness. They approached herds in slow arcs, looking for stragglers or weakened animals. The riders slept lightly because they understood that danger arrived not with a roar, but with the faintest shift in sound. You push your blanket up just enough to free one arm, then quickly retreat back into the warmth once you check the temperature. The cold hits hard. It tightens your skin instantly. You tuck your elbow back in and breathe into your blanket until the sting fades. You listen again, giving your senses time to quiet. A long moan from a distant cow drifts through the dark. Not panic, just discomfort. Then a soft shuffle of hooves. Then silence. You remain still, feeling the tension in your muscles linger. You know the cattle's rhythm by now. Their breathing has patterns. Their movements have a pulse. Any break in that pulse is a warning. A faint sound touches your ear. A low, drawn-out yip rising somewhere near the horizon. You recognize it immediately. Coyotes. Their voices float through the cold air like thin threads of music. One yip becomes 3, then fades. You listen carefully, counting the distance. They are far, but not far enough to ignore. Coyotes rarely pose danger to full-grown cattle, but they investigate. They probe, and their presence can unsettle a herd more than the cold ever could. You shift slightly in your bedroll, mindful of noise. The buffalo lining brushes your chin, warm and coarse. You peer over the top of your blanket and watch the horizon. Nothing moves. The stars flicker faintly above you, but the ground remains still. A small, curious story whispered along many trail crews returns to mind. Some cowboys claimed coyotes liked to test sleeping men, creeping close enough to sniff bedrolls if the herd felt calm. Others argued this was pure exaggeration, born from men who spent too long alone in the cold. The truth lies somewhere uncertain. Tonight you imagine the possibility and pull your blanket a little tighter. You listen again. Your horse gives a soft, uneasy snort. That sound sharpens your senses more than any coyote call. Horses do not spook at every noise. They respond to patterns, to movement. You raise your head slightly, letting your breath drift out in a thin white cloud. The horse steps once, then grows still again. That is good. If danger were close, the animal would not have calmed so quickly. You settle back down, though you keep your head slightly raised. Sleeping near predators required a strange balance. You had to rest, but you also had to maintain a thin thread of consciousness, a small flame of awareness glowing in the back of your mind. Cowboys mastered this state through experience, often claiming that the land itself taught them to sleep lightly. A topic of ongoing discussion among researchers comes to you as you stare into the dark. Some argue that cowboys developed a heightened sense of nocturnal awareness simply because the environment demanded it. Others believe the long hours spent alone with animals sharpened their instincts beyond normal limits. Either explanation feels believable when you hear another distant yip echo across the prairie. Your muscles tighten again, then slowly relax. You lower your cheek back onto the saddle. The leather is cold but familiar. Your breath warms the space inside your blanket. You keep your hand near your chest, tucked tightly. The night grows quiet again. The coyotes have moved on, at least for now. But predators are not the only creatures that complicate a cowboy's rest. Cougars stalk silently, their paws barely touching the earth. Their eyes follow movement with careful precision. They do not call out or alert their prey. They simply wait. The thought slips into your mind, not as fear, but as cautious respect. Cowboys encountered cougars more often than many modern readers assume. The animals avoided fire and camp noise, but drifted close on quiet, moonless nights. You angle your face upward, scanning the nearby ridgeline. Your breath curls into the air. Nothing moves. No shadow breaks the line of grass. You exhale slowly, letting your weariness settle behind your ribs. The range feels huge, but cougars know how to disappear inside it. A memory shared in many old ranch journals floats forward now. Some trail hands claimed their best warning during cougar nights came from the cattle themselves. A cow would raise its head, another would shift uneasily. A quiet ripple of tension would pass through the herd. Cowboys learn to trust that ripple more than their own eyes. You listen carefully for that ripple now. The cattle remain calm. The rhythm holds. Crickets begin to chirp softly near your feet. The sound is faint, almost apologetic after the storm's roar. You feel your shoulders loosen. Predators rarely approach when insects feel safe enough to resume their songs. You breathe deeper, inhaling the cold air and the faint scent of sagebrush drifting nearby. The sky widens above you again, the stars emerging with clearer brilliance now that the gusts have died down. The moon peeks from behind a small patch of cloud, casting a pale glow across the prairie. Your bedroll warms slowly around you, responding to your steady breath. You tuck your chin deeper into the blanket and let your eyelids lower, though not fully. Another story from cowboy lore rises in your memory. Some riders said the best way to rest on predator-heavy nights was to imagine you were floating above your own body, lightly tethered, but always aware. They described a kind of drifting half-sleep where sound became more vivid than vision. You feel yourself slipping into that state now. The cattle breathe. Your horse shifts lightly. The wind brushes the grass with a faint whisper. You inhale again. Your body grows heavier, warmer. The cold hovers outside the canvas but fails to break through. The danger of the night becomes a distant possibility rather than an immediate threat. You can rest. Not deeply, not completely, but enough. You close your eyes halfway, letting the prairie soundscape keep your senses balanced. Coyotes call once more, farther this time. The cattle remain calm. Your horse stands steady, and you drift quietly along the edge of sleep, wrapped in wool, wrapped in darkness, wrapped in the strange companionship of the wild creatures that share this frozen night. You lie still for a long moment, letting the final echoes of coyote calls slide off into the distance. The herd settles again, your horse relaxes, and the night drifts back to its slow, steady rhythm. You feel your breath warming the inside of your blanket, soft and reassuring. But out here, sleep does not always happen on the ground. Cowboys often spent entire days and nights in the saddle, especially during long drives when time pressed and distance mattered more than comfort. Tonight you allow your thoughts to follow one of those long trail nights, imagining what it felt like to drift into half-dreams while riding under a frozen sky. You pull your blanket a bit higher and shift your cheek against the saddle. The leather feels warm now, the curve familiar. You picture yourself rising from this patch of ground, throwing the blanket over your shoulders, and stepping back into the saddle, even though your body aches. Cowboys sometimes rode through the night to calm a restless herd, or to reach a distant water source before sunrise. In those hours, the saddle became both chair and bed, a strange cradle that rocked with the rhythm of your horse's gait. A widely accepted detail in old trail diaries slips into your thoughts. Many cowhands learned to sleep lightly while mounted, trusting their horses to follow the herd or the trail without much guidance. Riders slumped forward, reins loosely wrapped around one hand, eyes half closed as their horses carried them through long, cold hours. The mount kept moving, kept breathing, kept warmed by its own muscles. You imagine the steady sway beneath you, a slow side-to-side motion that lulls your body the way waves lull a tired sailor. You shift inside your bedroll now, feeling that imagined motion settle into your mind. The idea seems impossible at first. Sleep while riding? But the rhythm of a good horse is steady, predictable, and far gentler than the frozen ground pressing under your back. After days of riding, your muscles learned the patterns so deeply that your mind could drift without losing balance. Some trail hands claimed they could nap sitting upright, eyes closed, while their horses followed the herd naturally. Whether they slept or slipped into a trance is hard to tell, but the body finds rest in strange places when exhaustion demands it. A small, curious anecdote often shared among ranch veterans flickers in your memory. Some riders said they dreamed vividly in the saddle, drifting into strange visions filled with dust, hoofbeats, and faraway campfires. They claimed the rocking motion shaped the dreams, turning them into slow, floating scenes that blurred between trail reality and wandering imagination. You imagine those dreams now, drifting through moonlight, hearing faint cattle calls echoing inside your mind, feeling your horse's warmth beneath you even as your thoughts wander far. You shift your legs slightly inside the warmth of your roll. Your knees brush against the blanket, and the sensation reminds you of gripping the sides of a saddle to stay balanced. You picture your hands resting gently along the horn, fingers numb with cold but still steady enough to stay connected. The night air around you feels deep, heavy, and strangely quiet. You let that silence wrap around you. Your horse snorts nearby, breaking your thoughts for a moment. You glance toward its silhouette. Horses played a critical role in those late-night rides. Their instincts guided the movement more than any conscious command from the rider. Riders trusted their horses deeply during these hours. When eyes closed, reins loosened, and minds drifted, the horse became the true guardian of that fragile sleep. An ongoing discussion in cowboy history comes to mind. Some researchers suggest that riders developed a unique sensory awareness while sleeping in the saddle, able to detect shifts in movement even while partly unconscious. Others argue that it was not awareness at all, but the horse compensating for the rider's relaxed posture. The debate remains unresolved, and perhaps it always will. You feel that ambiguity as you imagine yourself swaying with each gentle step the horse takes. You adjust your body again, curling deeper into the blankets, letting their weight mimic the shape of a saddle's embrace. Your eyelids grow heavier. The rhythm of cattle breathing and the faint rustle of prairie grass blend into a soothing undertone. Your thoughts wander back to those imagined night rides. You picture your horse walking steadily under a sky filled with stars, its hooves tapping softly against frozen soil. The pace is slow, unhurried, and the rest you gain is delicate but real. You picture yourself leaning forward, resting your chest lightly against the horse's neck, your cheek brushing warm hair. The horse radiates heat from long hours of movement. You inhale deeply and imagine the scent of dust, sweat, and crisp night wind. Many cowhands claimed that sleeping against a horse's neck was warmer than any blanket. You can almost feel that warmth now, drifting through your imagination like a gentle tide. A faint shift in the wind makes your blanket flutter slightly at the edge, pulling you back to the present. You tuck it more firmly around your shoulders and nestle deeper. The wind quiets. The herd remains calm. You listen to their slow breathing, letting it form a background hum. Your mind returns to the saddle. You imagine holding the reins loosely between two fingers, the leather pressing gently into your glove. The sway intensifies slightly as your horse steps over uneven ground. You adjust instinctively, shifting your weight even while half asleep. Cowboys described this unconscious balancing as second nature. Over time, the body learned to absorb each movement without waking fully. Another small story from old ranch cookbooks and campfire conversations appears in your thoughts. Some cowboys said the best sleep they ever had was in the saddle during a long, steady night ride, the kind where the horse moved without pause and the cold air kept their senses sharp, even as their minds drifted. They claimed the saddle shaped their dreams, giving them visions filled with star-filled skies and endless prairies. You picture those dreams unfolding like a slow-moving tapestry. Your breath grows slower now, steady and warm. You shift your hands beneath your chin, feeling the wool scratch lightly against your knuckles. The quiet of the range presses gently around you. The cold still exists, but your blankets cradle you, building warmth in the space between fabric and skin. You imagine the moment when a cowboy would wake abruptly in the saddle. A slight jolt, a hoof stumbling, a steer bellowing, eyes snapping open to a sky that looks exactly the same as it did moments earlier. You picture yourself blinking awake, gripping the saddle again, adjusting your weight, and guiding your horse back into alignment with the herd. You relax into the blankets, feeling sleep press closer. Your body sinks lightly against the canvas beneath you. The sound of the cattle's steady breathing aligns with your own. You let the imagined sway of the saddle drift across your senses, rocking you gently even though you remain on the cold ground. You sigh softly, warm air filling the space near your face. Your eyelids flutter. The night deepens. The range quiets. And wrapped in wool and shadow, you slip into your own drifting half-dreams, just as cowboys did while riding through the long, frozen nights of the wild. You shift in your bedroll, letting the imagined sway of saddle sleep fade from your thoughts as the cold reminds you where you truly are. Your breath curls softly against the wool, and the quiet across the range settles once again. But now your attention drifts to a far more practical problem, one that cowboys faced almost nightly whether they liked it or not. Wet gear. Nothing steals warmth more quickly. Nothing turns a quiet night into a slow torture more effectively. And nothing tested cowboy grit quite like climbing into a bedroll, with clothing soaked from river crossings, sleet, or sweat. You exhale into your blanket, feeling the warmth pool around your face. The air smells faintly of wool, dust, and the lingering echo of last night's storm. You shift one arm free and let it rest on the saddle, the leather cool beneath your palm. Wet gear was one of the cowboys' greatest enemies in cold weather, and you can almost feel the dread of peeling off damp clothing after hours of riding through icy creeks or sudden rain. A detail often mentioned in the old remembrances of trail hands flickers through your mind. Cowboys rarely had the luxury of letting gear dry fully. On long drives, they crossed rivers without stopping. They rode through sudden downpours that turned dust to mud in seconds. They worked cattle in freezing sleet with water dripping steadily from the brim of their hats. By nightfall, everything they owned weighed twice as much with moisture. Yet they had no choice but to sleep in it or beside it. You pull the buffalo-lined blanket tighter around your shoulders as you imagine the feel of wet wool clinging to your skin. Damp wool is heavy, stubborn, and slow to warm. Cowboys often describe the sensation like wearing a sponge that refused to give back any heat. You press further into the warmth of your roll, grateful your own layers are dry tonight, but the memory of their discomfort lingers in your thoughts. Your horse gives a soft grunt nearby. You glance in its direction. The animal shakes itself, releasing a faint spray of frost into the air. Its coat is thick, built for surviving the worst weather, yet even horses suffered under wet saddles and damp blankets. Cowboys did everything they could to protect their mounts, but the elements were relentless. A curious anecdote from old trail lore drifts into your memory. Some cowhands claimed the best way to dry a wet blanket was to sleep inside it, letting the heat of your own body push the moisture outward. The idea sounds miserable, but desperate men did what desperate nights required. They wrapped themselves in damp wool and breathed warmth into it until the fibers softened. You imagine doing that now. The cold would bite at first, maybe even sting. But slowly, painfully, the warmth would return. You tuck your knees slightly, letting the blanket fold more snugly around your hips. The warmth deepens. You know that if your clothing were wet, you would not dare move too much. Movement pushes cold air into damp fabric. Stillness helps build heat. Cowboys often lay stiff as boards during wet nights, trying to coax warmth into the clinging layers inch by inch. A long-standing discussion among frontier historians arises in your thoughts. Some believed cowboys grew so used to wet gear that their bodies adapted, toughening their skin and nerves to cold moisture. Others insisted no one truly adjusted to it, and riders simply endured through willpower and exhaustion. You sense the difficulty of choosing a side. Endurance and adaptation feel almost intertwined out here. You shift slightly, letting the blanket rustle quietly. The cold tries to edge in again. You feel it along your collarbones and the tips of your ears. You pull your hat down a little more and exhale slowly into the warmth. Then your mind drifts to another problem cowboys faced: frozen gear. Damp clothing or saddles left out too long could freeze into stiff, unyielding shapes. Saddles became hard as boards. Blankets crackled when folded. Lariats turned rigid and unruly. Cowboys woke to find their coats frozen into strange, hunched positions, as if occupied by invisible spirits. You imagine reaching for a frozen coat in the morning. It resists, stiff and stubborn. You would have to slam it against the saddle horn or stomp it under your boot heel to break the frost. The idea makes your fingers ache just thinking about it. Your own coat remains soft tonight, warmed by your body heat and shielded inside the roll, but you can almost feel the ghost of that icy stiffness against your skin. Your horse shifts again. Its breath drifts in steady clouds. You watch the rhythmic puff, warm and alive. Cowboys sometimes hung wet clothing over the backs of their horses while riding, letting the animal's body heat dry the fabric. It worked surprisingly well, though not always comfortably for the horse, but in desperate cold, survival took priority over courtesy. You nestle deeper into your bedroll, imagining the frustration of lying down in wet socks. Feet mattered more than almost anything. Frozen toes did not heal easily. Cowboys often rubbed their feet vigorously before sleeping or held them close to their horses' warm sides. Some stuffed grass or spare cloth into their boots to create makeshift insulation. You stretch your toes inside your own warm socks now, grateful for dryness. A small tale floats into your thoughts, something trail cooks like to tell around meager camp stoves. They said the best cure for wet gear was a fire that refused to die, and a man stubborn enough to turn his blankets slowly every few minutes. But fires were not always available, and even when they were, too much heat could scorch wool or shrink leather. Cowboys had to use judgment, patience, and nothing more reliable than their own instincts. You inhale deeply, letting the warmth fill your chest. Then you imagine the slow misery of clothing that freezes to your skin. It happened more often than most care to imagine. Sweat trapped in fabric became icy glue. Removing such clothing tore at skin. Men avoided stripping layers on cold nights because once removed, damp shirts or trousers could not be put back on without agony. Staying dressed, even in misery, often meant survival. You shift again, curling into a slightly tighter posture. Your back warms as the blanket closes in around you. The imaginary chill fades. The reality of your warmth grows. Cowboys carried no spare outfits. If their gear was soaked, they lived with it. If their blankets were wet, they slept anyway, and somehow most endured. Your mind drifts now to the feeling of rising at dawn, after a night spent drying gear with nothing but your own body heat. The wool would feel slightly damp, but warmer. The coat softer. The saddle loosened just enough to avoid bruising. That slow process of thawing and drying became its own victory. Every cowboy knew the relief of realizing he had made it through the worst of the cold. You let the warmth of your own dry blankets soothe you deeper into rest. The cold remains outside. The herd breathes slowly in the distance. Your horse stands steady and relaxed. The night around you is vast, but your small shelter holds firm. And with your thoughts drifting among the countless struggles of wet wool, frozen leather, and stubborn endurance, you slip quietly towards sleep, warmed by gratitude for dryness and the faint memory of all those riders who faced the cold with nothing more than grit and determination. You curl deeper into your blankets, letting the warmth pool along your ribs, and the quiet around you settles into something softer. The storm has faded, the predators have drifted away, and the night feels still again. But the cold remains, a constant presence stretching across the prairie like an invisible sheet. As you breathe into your wool cocoon, You think about another unexpected tool cowboys used to survive freezing nights: snow itself. Strange as it sounds, snow could be an ally. A shelter, a buffer against wind that cut sharper than knives. Tonight you imagine discovering that truth the same way many cowboys once did, through quiet trial and uncertain necessity. You lift your head slightly from the saddle and look across the darkened plain. The stars glimmer faintly on the frost, and in some patches the ground looks faintly dusted with pale powder. You imagine stepping off your horse after a long, brutal ride through winter country, and realizing the only shelter available lies not above the ground, but on it. Cowboys learned that snow, packed correctly, could block wind far better than open air. When no rock, brush, or hillside offered protection, a drift became the next best thing. You stretch your toes within your blanket, feeling the growing warmth, and let your mind drift through the memory of old trail stories. A detail preserved in several winter cattle drive accounts rises to the surface. Riders learn to carve shallow hollows into snowbanks and settle their bedrolls inside the curve. The snow insulated against wind, trapping pockets of warmer air while blocking the worst gusts. The first few minutes were agony, but once the body heat settled into the small chamber, it created a surprising sense of protection. You shift your weight now, feeling the canvas beneath you, and imagining how cold it would be if not for the layers beneath your back. Then picture brushing snow aside to make a shallow dip. Your fingers sting even in imagination. The cold would numb your hands instantly. Cowboys worked fast, using boots, the flat of a hat, or sometimes the edge of a saddle to carve the shape. The goal was not depth but shelter, a curve that stopped the wind, a shape that held warmth. Something small enough that a single human body could heat the space. A small, curious anecdote from frontier stories drifts forward. Some cowboys claimed they slept warmer inside snow hollows than in open air, saying the wind could not find them there. They joked that snow made a better wall than any tent flap because it did not flap or tear. Whether they said this with pride or dry humor is impossible to know, but the idea left an impression on every rider who faced winter on the plains. You breathe slowly, your exhale warming the wool in front of your chin. The warmth feels steady. You imagine lying inside a drift with only a blanket between your body and frozen earth. At first, the cold would seep relentlessly into your bones, but after a few minutes, your own heat would start building a cocoon inside the hollow. Cowboys trusted this strange method because they had no alternative. Winter offered no mercy. If wind cut too fiercely, snow became the only shelter. Your horse shifts again nearby. The rustle of its movement reminds you that animals use snow for protection too. Wild bison, deer, and even wolves curled behind drifts to block the wind. Cowboys observed these animals over years and learned from them. They watched how mustangs positioned themselves behind raised mounds of snow, heads lowered, bodies angled. They saw survival mirrored in every creature across the plains. A long-standing conversation in ranch history comes to your thoughts. Some researchers argue that native tribes influenced cowboy winter tactics, including the use of snow as insulation. Others propose that cowboys learned primarily from observing animals after spending countless nights outdoors. Both ideas feel plausible, and you sense how knowledge on the range often came from layered sources, each shaped by necessity. You adjust your shoulder inside your blanket. The feeling of warmth reminds you how precious insulation becomes when winter tightens its grip. Now imagine settling inside a snow hollow. You would tuck your bedroll carefully, creating a small mound at your back. The drift would curve over you like a shallow roof. The wind would whistle above but fail to reach your body. The cold inside the hollow would still be fierce, but it would be still, not slicing or punishing. Cowboys valued still cold over sharp cold. Stillness meant your warmth could accumulate rather than be stolen. You shift again, picturing the steps. You would choose a drift that leaned slightly with the wind. You would carve just enough space for yourself, no more. Extra room meant extra cold. You would angle your body so your breath warmed the hollow. You would pull the blanket tight around your shoulders and tuck your knees toward your chest to build heat faster. The snow surrounding you would act like a wall, thick and unmoving, keeping the wind above your head. A story passes through your mind, one shared by an old foreman in his later years. He claimed he once survived a brutal blizzard by curling inside a drift with his horse standing guard at the entrance. The animal sheltered the opening, blocking even more wind. Whether the story was fact or embellishment hardly mattered. It captured the strange, resourceful relationship cowboys had with the land and their animals. You nestle deeper into your bedroll now, as if demonstrating the same instinct. The cold outside seems distant, pushed back by the warmth you created earlier. The sound of the herd drifts lightly across the night. A soft shuffle, a low grunt. The rhythm remains calm. Your eyelids grow heavy again, but you stay half aware. You imagine the snow hollow from the inside, the gentle glow of moonlight filtering through the thin top layer, the muffled sound of wind. The way the world seems smaller, quieter, more intimate. Cowboys often describe the feeling as being inside the earth rather than on it, enclosed by nature's own walls. The comfort was fragile, but it existed. You shift your legs, curling them slightly closer. The warmth inside your roll deepens. You imagine frost forming lightly on the edge of your blanket if you slept inside a snowbank. Cowboys woke with ice crystals glinting in their beards, snowflakes clinging to their sleeves, and frozen breath decorating the underside of their hats. Yet they survived. The snow trapped their heat well enough to outlast the storm. You inhale deeply, letting the warm air settle across your chest. The cold outside hovers patiently, but inside your cocoon everything grows softer. The prairie stretches wide, but the night feels close and safe for the moment. You think once more about how strange it is that snow, something so bitter and cold, could become shelter. But out here, survival does not depend on comfort. It depends on recognizing every tool the land offers, even the ones that appear at first as threats. You close your eyes slowly, keeping one ear tuned to your horse and the herd. The cold remains, but your warmth holds. The darkness remains, but your shelter stands strong. And wrapped in wool, memory, and stillness, you drift again toward rest, surrounded by the quiet knowledge that even winter's harshest elements could be turned into allies by those who called the range their home. You ease your head deeper into the saddle's curve, letting the warmth inside your blanket settle into a steady pulse. The night around you has grown impossibly quiet again, stripped clean by the storm's passing. Even the wind seems to be catching its breath, and in this long stretch of stillness, your mind drifts to something cowboys relied on more than blankets, bedrolls, or snow shelters. Something humble, bitter, and strangely comforting. Coffee, midnight coffee. The one ritual that cut through exhaustion and cold with a clarity nothing else could match. You shift slightly, imagining the moment when a cowboy crawled out of his bedroll in the dark, fingers numb, joints stiff, and moved toward the faint glow of a campfire or a few reignited coals. He crouched low, shielding any spark from the wind, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to stand on its own legs. The steam rose into the cold, carrying the smell of roasted beans mixed with smoke and iron. Even now, with no fire burning near you, you can almost smell that earthy aroma floating through memory. A widely accepted detail in trail camp records comes to mind. Cowboys drank coffee at every hour, but the night ritual had a special purpose. The caffeine pushed back against freezing fatigue, keeping the mind sharp during herd watches or sudden storms. The warmth sank into hands and bellies, giving the body the illusion of heat even when the temperature plummeted. Many riders swore they would have frozen without it. Whether the claim was literal or not, it hints at how deeply coffee shaped their nights. You inhale slowly, imagining that first sip. The taste would be harsh, bitter, sometimes burned, sometimes watery, sometimes thick with leftover grounds. But in the cold, flavor did not matter. Warmth mattered, heat sliding down, the throat mattered. That faint burst of energy mattered. Cowboys embraced these small comforts fiercely. You shift again, your blanket brushing your chin. Your breath warms the wool as you imagine kneeling beside a battered pot. Cowboys often kept the coffee simmering long past midnight, adding water again and again, until the brew turned black and murky. They joked that a spoon could stand upright in a proper cowboy pot. Some crews believed coffee should taste like penalty and survival at the same time. A small, curious tale whispered among chuck wagon cooks floats into your thoughts. Some riders insisted the coffee tasted best when made with water scooped from a slow-moving creek under starlight. They said the minerals made the brew richer, smoother. Others scoffed at this idea, claiming that all coffee tasted like mud unless the pot boiled hard enough. These disagreements never ended, and they never needed to. Cowboys took pride in simple things. The imaginary warmth of that cup lingers as you exhale into your bedroll again. You feel your fingers loosen a little, the cold lifting just enough. You picture holding a tin mug between your hands, heat radiating through the metal, the steam rising, the comfort settling along your stomach like a glowing coal. You imagine sipping slowly, your breath mixing with the rising steam, your thoughts sharpening with each swallow. Your horse shifts nearby. The movement reminds you of how often night riders shared their coffee with their horses through quiet gestures. Not the drink itself, but the warmth. Cowboys placed their warm hands on the animals' necks or blew warm air near their ears, offering tiny comforts to their four-legged partners. Horses stood through freezing nights without blankets or fire, relying on instinct and their own heavy coats. A human's touch, even a brief one, offered a strange kind of reassurance. You adjust your legs, tucking your knees slightly closer inside the bedroll. The warmth grows richer,